All right, ladies and gentlemen, our next theme focuses on community engagement and information dissemination with special focus on raising awareness through women-led awareness campaigns, targeted messaging, and educational activities to improve heat preparedness and response. It's time that together we give a round of applause and a warm welcome for the speakers for the session. Ms. Bijal Brahmbhat, Executive Director, Mahila Housing Trust. Bijal Ben, તમારું સ્વાગત છે. Ms. Mary McBride, Chief Program Officer, Climate Resilience for All. Very warm welcome. I hand over the stage to Dr. Satish Kumar to facilitate the session.
Hi, so we are going to move into the third session of this particular theme, and this is titled Community Engagement and Information Dissemination. So we looked at the solutions in the first part. We talked about the outdoor thermal heat stress in the second theme, and now we are moving into community engagement and information dissemination. So I think I have already given my opening remarks, so I will straight away invite our experts here, and the first speaker is Bijal Brahmbhat. She's the Executive Director, Mahila Housing Trust. I'm pretty sure that most of you, if not all of you, are already aware of the wonderful work that you are doing, Bijal Madam, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Satish ji. I'll just begin and I'll try to be as fast as possible. I know we are waiting lunch. I would first of all like to congratulate the organizers for having brought in cooling with heating. It was very much needed. And the second, congratulations again for having recognized. If you look at the title of our session, it's Poor Women-Led Socio-Technical Models. So I think for a long time I have been trying to break that barrier that grassroots development organizations can also be technical, but people rarely understand. So for the first time, I'm thanking the organizers that, that title has been given. So Mahila Housing Trust, actually our vision is poor women workers lead responsible urban development. And we work across almost 10 states in India, created 17,000 climate and heat champions. When we first started working with our women, we were working on issues of habitat development earlier, but when we started sensing climate change and talking to them, they didn't really understand what climate change was. And for them, it was merely God's act. It was not at their forefront because they were fighting to get water, to get livelihood, to get the school fees. And so how do you really build in climate change into that? So what we did is our approach is that we do take up activities that engage them immediately, whether it's lack of water or sanitation or social security, and try and build in climate change on that. And that has been very successful. And I will talk of some principles that we have used in our community engagement, which has been fairly successful. So the first thing is demystify the science. So because we do want them to talk at an equal level with whether they are talking with the authorities or with the general public. So how do we do that? So for example, we wanted to, this is one example, wanted to explain to them that climate change is a systemic process and you have to address all systems for able to, so that is true also with heat resilience. So this is like a water cycle and we mapped all the elements with the scientists, and then we put those elements on those chits, and when the chits were pulled, the rope actually shook. So all the other elements also shook, and that's how we explained to them systems change. So I think our approach was first that of capacity building on climate change, where we used a lot of gamification, as I'm showing you one example. Then, of course, to help them assess their vulnerabilities, also support them in building action plans, and then making technological innovations along with them, and then, of course, developing a model that works at city level too. So the first principle is demystify the science using simple gamification so that they are able to talk at an equal level. Second principle, of course, that they are already vulnerable, but they are able to include the most vulnerable. So people, for example, who don't get early warning systems on heat, our community women actually then put up notice boards in their slum settlements and engage with the households and on individual solutions. We have developed a model, that's the third principle, that actually works at household level. Then it goes to community level, but they also then start working at a city level to, in fact, the formal citizens have started benefiting. How have we done that? I'll do it quickly. So household level, one example which I'm not showing here is doing cool roofs for themselves. Community led, it could be nature-based solution like reviving water wells or urban forestry, which we are doing. And at city level, it could be heat mapping, it could be cooling shelters for other informal sector workers and demanding heat action plans and getting those done. The other thing that the next principle is that we have to have disruptive collaborations. I'm sorry, where does this go? Okay. So look at this cool roof technology that we have experimented. What we do is actually, the blue is the cool roof and the other is the tin sheet. And we actually taught the women to take temperature by putting temperature loggers inside and comparing it to the IMD and to the adjacent house with the tin sheets. They realized it's really cooler. And then they started investing in propagating cool roofs. Almost 18,000 cool roofs have been done. But the disruptive collaboration was that they told the technologist that they don't want corrugations. The blue roof had corrugations. They did not want it. They wanted a flat roof to fly kite and sleep at night. And those were the learnings for the technologist, and he then adjusted his technology. This one is the fifth principle is that they can engage with Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar. So you're looking at India's first cooling station already established in Jodhpur under the Jodhpur Heat Action Plan, which they led with the government. It's a net zero cooling station. They've also done heat mapping for the entire city of Surat using FLIR cameras with World Bank. And that's going to contribute to a plan where the Surat city is actually going to revive, make a riverfront on the Tapi river, and that data by the community where it was taken Surat-wide using FLIR cameras is going to be used by the municipal corporation. The sixth principle is that they can inspire and catalyze innovations and use digital technology. So a lot of our women have been using AI technologies to gather ground level data. I'm not talking of Landsat, I'm not talking of ERA5 for heat. Those models are developed and then tested on ground by our women so that their efficacy increases. We have done heat insurance, and today, as a part of the Ahmedabad Heat Action Plan, we've also done the first cool bus stop where low-income people travel. In fact, it was inaugurated today at 12 o'clock. So I think that's the sixth principle. And so our model has revolved around these six principles, making poor women lead from their own households to the city level in an equal partnership. And I'll stop here because...
Thank you, Bijal madam, for sharing like how do you foster heat resilience through socio-technical approaches being led by women groups and in very, very vulnerable communities. So this is a tremendous example of, I think, how I think these kind of solutions are very much needed on the ground, especially in informal settlements. And of course, I think Mahila Housing Trust is a model for, I think, many other organizations. I'm going to request our next speaker, Mary McBride. She is the Chief Program Officer at Climate Resilient for All. And she's also going to be talking on the same topic, and but from a slightly different perspective.
Great, thank you. And I want to say thank you to our host for sponsoring this event. It's incredible to be part of this important conversation. So we heard in the last conversation about the 300 million workers in India, and there are roughly 618 million informal women workers. 80% of those workers reside in 5 regions: South Asia, Southeast Asia, Eastern Asia, West Africa, and East Africa. Can you hear me now? Okay. And so when you look at the map that Radhika showed yesterday around the heat vulnerability or the heat risk, and you overlay the vulnerability of these women workers, that region, those 5 regions that I just named, are where the bulk of women workers are suffering from extreme heat. They are suffering mental, physical impacts, and they are losing daily wages. So when you talk about community engagement, the place you have to start is understanding how are they being impacted and what solutions do they need, what interventions do they need to help give them agency to make decisions in the face of rising temperatures. And so starting from that basic platform, we heard yesterday quite a bit about awareness. So we spent a great deal of time listening to the communities, working with partners. And one of the things that we launched in 2025 was something called the Women's Climate Shock Insurance and Livelihoods Initiative. It's a global initiative that we started here in India with the Self-Employed Women's Association and with a group called Quindo Corps in Pakistan. And essentially what we are doing is taking an integrated look at the solutions that are needed to empower and to protect the health and livelihoods of women, particularly informal women workers. And so that combines financial solutions and non-financial solutions. The financial solutions include a robust set of financial tools, one of which is heat parametric insurance. We pioneered the first heat parametric insurance at our former organization, and then when we co-founded CRA, we developed a new approach, we innovated, and we also built alongside with the insurance a set of tools that serve as social protection, so a direct cash assistance layer. So when temperatures hit 40 or 42 or 43, you have a systems of financial instruments that are triggered to build the resilience to support women in times of in times of urgent heat waves, but also to build the resilience over the long term, not just their resilience to heat, but their financial resilience. The non-financial solutions include early warning systems. Here in India, in Thailand, in Sierra Leone, we're working to train women to understand what are the technological platforms that will reach them. What are the messages that provide actionable guidance? We heard about that earlier today. And so we're looking at those type of interventions. We are also looking at physical adaptations, including shade, including simple things such as tarps to cover their crops. And so it's a whole set of solutions that we bring to our communities where we are working, again, across these 618 million informal workers. And I think if I would say a couple points to leave you with, it's one that women are disproportionately impacted by the impacts of extreme heat, financially, mentally, and physically. And so you need to look at a set of solutions that are both financial and non-financial to build their financial resilience and their heat resilience and their resilience writ broad to the impacts of extreme heat and rising temperatures. We heard yesterday that this is not, just an urgent crisis, but this is a crisis that we're going to be faced with for the foreseeable future. Heat is locked in, rising temperatures is locked in for as far as we can imagine right now. So the last thing I would say is that when we think about the solution set, it is absolutely critical to think both about how we transfer the risk, and so that is via tools like parametric heat insurance and others, but also how we reduce the risk, and that is through physical adaptations, or in the case of our project with SEVA in 2024, the social protection in the form of a direct cash assistance. And without that dual approach, without looking at both how you transfer the risk and how you reduce the risk, we're not going to deliver a set of meaningful and durable impacts and solutions and build the heat resilience of women. And I would just say last that we've again heard that this is an urgent crisis. It's also a long-term problem, and women are at the center of the solutions. The women that I've met with in Thailand and Bangkok, here in India, in Gujarat, in Freetown, and Ghana and Liberia, they are the sources of strength. They are already resilient. We need to increase their resilience as they face mounting climate shocks and particularly extreme heat. So with that, I think my buzzer's going to go off in a second and I'll be done on time. And I just wanted to say that these are some of the women that we are reaching. These are some of the 650 million women and some of the women who are in desperate need of solutions and assistance and interventions that will help empower them as we look at the impacts of climate and in particularly extreme heat. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for sharing some of those stories. I think of your work, your organization's work in Africa and Southeast Asia. We have another Mentimeter question round for setting the context for the questions that we are going to ask our esteemed panelists. So I'm again going to request all the people in the audience to please scan the QR code and vote in terms of like the different the options that you get. So and while we are waiting, I'm going to maybe have a couple of issues that I just want to put on the table for both of you to respond. So I think we know that there is a tremendous need for addressing some of the challenges related to heat stress here and now. But we also know that I think India and some of the other countries are transforming very, very fast. So the developmental model, I think that we see today, and I think what will be there in 10 years from now, how big that piece is, I think in terms of having a both short-term outlook, I think a rapid response as well as sort of like a medium-term response. So that's one. And then a kind of related issue is that I think you are talking about some of these work that you are doing. How do you scale it? This is a question I'm sure that both of you get asked very, very often. And what is the solution? Because Bijal Madam, you talked about that you have done this school roof over 18,000. You're talking about millions and millions of homes here. So, and same thing, Mary, you are, I think, is showing some pilot examples. So maybe I think you can share, I think, some of your responses before we go to the Mentimeter question. You want to start?
So I guess I would say this, which is in 2024, we reached 50,000 women here in India with the Women's Climate Shock Insurance and Livelihood Initiative. We are on target in 2025, this year, with the incredible partnership with SEVA to reach 250,000 women. We have expanded the program into Thailand, Ghana, and Sierra Leone. So we are scaling the program both geographically and then in the place where we're already working. So that is one way. I think the other thing is when you think about the set of integrated solutions that we are delivering through the WCS, it lends itself to bringing other investors, MDBs, other governmental agencies into looking at the solutions because we're showing that it's proof. It's a proof point that it works and you can scale it. And the last thing I would say is I think insurance alone, again, is not an answer. It has to be combined with other social protections in order to serve, particularly in our case, informal women, workers, and other vulnerable populations. Sure.
In my experience, I don't think technologies exist for the poor. So first of all, I'm going to talk about what the poor accept and scale. So we did with solar reflective white paints, but the blue roof that I talked about was much more accepted. The women took loans up to 200,000 rupees for that and not for the solar reflective paint. They said we will contribute a certain percentage, but we can't buy it out and out. The reason for that was that though the blue roof was costlier, it was aspirational. So I have my own metrics when the poor will adopt and scale themselves. Based on my experience are 4 things. It has to be affordable, but it has to be aspirational, which is very important for the poor. They want to show it that they have come out of poverty. I think it should be accessible because we couldn't scale because the startup which was promoting this got unfortunately destroyed during the COVID, and there are supply side issues with startups quite a lot. And then, so it's aspirational, affordable, accessibility, and user friendliness. are the four that I have derived from my experience for scale. Secondly, I think what is most important is that, of course, you have to keep, sort of pushing the Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar. And for us, we have very nicely done all three. And Samaj is our poor women-led collectives who also, sort of try to work with Rotary clubs and other, areas in other sort of. For example, that cooling station was not for our collectives, it was for other vendors or construction workers. So I think the local mass which keeps exerting pressure on the government to keep performing, otherwise your plans will remain plans, is something that I have learned. So I think the sustainability also has to come off the plans into translating into action through a people's movement. So while we may have innovations, I think apart from the other things required to scale up, our approach has been this.
All right. So thank you for those responses. And let's go to our Mentimeter poll. This is the question is, which impact of extreme heat would you emphasize the most in community awareness campaigns to drive action? And I think there are four sort of like options out there. The one that has gotten the maximum vote is like loss of life and health risks, and the second one is the loss of productivity and income. So the second one is of course related to livelihood and aspirational part that you are talking about, and the first one is I think the health issue that we are discussing. So thoughts on, I think, what according to you, I think what you are seeing in the field when you are talking about this issue and trying to mobilize action and trying to form these cooperative groups led by women, I think what are your thoughts, if you can share on that?
So we talked to a lot of women, did a lot of FGDs, but I think about 23% losses on four aspects we have seen. One is of course loss in productivity. Second is in terms of their livelihood, including home-based workers. Second is that they have a reduced footfall of customers. Third is that and because of that they bring in less and sell less. Third is there are health impacts which are not taken care of by the hospital, like the mental burden, especially for women. They have menstrual periods which are very difficult. Then also dual care burden increases. So there are expenses on health which are not taken care of by the medical insurance because you don't really get hospitalized. And and then in cities where you have good electrification, for example in Gujarat, in Bihar it didn't come, but in Gujarat it was very obvious that their utility expenses and maintenance expenses doubled in seasons of heat. So while there was a loss of income, the expense also increased on health and utility, which was a basis to our heat insurance. So that has been our
Yeah, I think I would say it's health and financial impact. And I think on the health side, I think it's just worth noting that someone said it earlier, and I think it was said yesterday as well, no one has to die from the impacts of extreme heat, and yet they are. And so what do we do about that? And I think when you think about women who are particularly vulnerable, it is known that with a 1 degree maternal heat exposure, your increase of stillborn birth or miscarriage is up to 42%. Just think about that for a minute. 1 degree, and we already see temperatures expanding and growing much more than 1 degree. Secondly, we know that gender violence increases during periods of extreme weather, including heat waves. A study in Kenya showed that 60% of women reported greater gender violence during periods of extreme weather, including heat waves. The list goes on and on and on around how women are impacted by extreme heat. The other piece of it is in many of the communities where we live, women are the backbones. They are the sole breadwinner or the primary breadwinner. And any loss of income has a crippling and cascading effect on their ability to protect themselves, their families, and show up in their communities. So the impact on the ability of a woman to continue working in conditions of extreme heat is absolutely essential to not only their lives, but to the larger global community and economic development. So it is also a humanitarian issue and an economic crisis.
Okay, maybe I think there is 2 minutes remaining. So I'll take, I'm looking for maybe like a couple of women who may have some questions here for our esteemed panelists, but be very short, ask the question. I think we are running late, and I think I'll request the panelists to be also giving a short response. This is, I'm taking my liberty as the moderator. They are asking me to shut down. So anyone, I think that I can see any hands. I will give a preference to like, okay, there is one there. I think introduce yourself and be short, I think, with your question.
Hi, this is Shruti Deora, UC Berkeley. Question for Mary. I think the parametric heat insurance has really transformed the way we are thinking about climate risk for vulnerable communities. How are you, and you talked about scaling it up, how are you able to scale it up as the climate warms further and we are just going to see more and more extreme heat events? Where is the money going to come from?
Okay, any other question? Okay, maybe very short and very quick because I don't see any other hand. So this is the last question and then I'll come back here.
Thank you, Chair, in spite of a lot of time constraint you have allowed me. My question is simple and straightforward. These two presentations gave a lot of answers to the questions which were raised in the previous The only question I have is that whether the heat mitigation plans will overlap with the disaster management plans and the climate adaptation and mitigation plan. So there is going to be perhaps a confusion about the cities getting instructions to prepare heat mitigation plans as well as disaster management plans and climate change plans.
So maybe I think the way I understood it is that the heat management plan, how it is interfacing with the climate action plans and some other things, and how do you balance them out? So maybe I think you just take
so we are ourselves also focusing on very small cities which others don't take up. Doing climate action plans and heat action plans with our women. So as a part of the climate action plan, the adaptation would come out as heat if you are working in a very hot area, and then you have to specifically, as a part of the climate action plan, work on heat. But you don't need to do a climate action plan to understand that heat is the vagary here. So that's how you really interact, as a part of the climate action plan, but then it's an adaptation strat. The climate action plan will also look at other mitigation strategies. So it would have mitigation, it would have adaptation where heat would come in.
Sure. Great question, and thank you. So 2 answers on that. One would be that part of the long-term sustainability is the uptake by federal agents, governments and ministries and others. It's also going to require the player of FCDO and other, multilaterals. The other part of it is also with our SAVA project and with our project in Sierra Leone and Ghana, we will be asking the women, and this is part of SAVA's ethos, is to support part of the premium that's required to build these insurance products. So that is happening. It happened last year. It's happening this year. But I think you raise a really good point. We've seen insurance industries in the U.S. pull out of California, pull out of other places because the risks are just too high, which goes back to my original point. Insurance alone is not the solution. It needs to be built with other financial and non-financial solutions. Insurance might not always be a solution, but it is something that we can address and utilize right now to transfer the risk, and so we should. And there are many folks working on this, and so that is critical. And I have to just real quick say something on the heat action plans. In Africa, the first heat action plan was just released in February last month, and unlike India, this is a new thing for Africa, and part of that is it's part of their NDCs, it's part of community engagement. It is grounded in understanding the larger national context of what both the city and the national governments are trying to do around climate change, both on the mitigation side and on the adaptation side.
Small information, because of our constant pressure now, the NDMA is going to experiment with heat insurance for the first time in Delhi and Maharashtra. So maybe there are other actors who are taking this up and putting pressure, and at the end of the day it would be adopted by the government. That's the only solution.